I am saying that this president has done a horrible thing, that this administration that's supporting him and not standing up and speaking the truth are supporting the president in a way that continues his ability to hold on to these children or not find them, what have you. And so when I spoke, I stand by my speech.
If you disagree with someone or something, stand up. Make your voice heard. Explain why you think they're wrong and why you're right. Make the argument. Protest peacefully. But no one should call for the harassment of political opponents. That's not right. That's not American.
Which is what many Democrats thought that Maxine Waters did over the weekend, reacting to the story about Sarah Sanders being thrown out of that Red Hen restaurant in Virginia. She said, you need to push back on them. You tell them they're not welcome anywhere anymore. The president tweeting out about Maxine Waters, saying this, quote, the president said, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, an extraordinarily low IQ person, has become, together with Nancy Pelosi, the face of the Democrat Party. She has just called for harm for supporters, of which there are many, of the Make America Great Again movement. Be careful what you wish for, Max. Okay, what about all of this? Let's bring in our panel. Steve Hayes, editor-in-chief for the Weekly Standard. Mara Liasson, national political correspondent of National Public Radio. And Charles Hurt, opinion editor for the Washington Times. Charlie.
Well, you've probably gone a little too far if you have Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi sort of pulling her chain back a little bit there on Maxine Waters' remarks. It's tough. I know that this is the kind of thing that really excites a lot of the sort of most rabid supporters on the left, not necessarily even of the Democratic Party, but on the left, the most vociferous haters of Donald Trump. But it's not helping them win any new voters in the middle. And when you have a debate where you have Donald Trump struggling with the vast complexities on the border, trying to figure out some way to fix this problem that nobody likes, as one choice, and then the other choice is Maxine Waters going out saying, pester these people in public. I think most voters are going to sort of be forced towards the Trump version.
This does happen a lot, it seems, when Democrats are looking at a political upside for a story that maybe is cratering on the Republican side. Then they kind of go over their skis sometimes. Yeah. John Tester and Heidi Heitkamp and Joe Donnelly all have to answer questions about Maxine Waters.
Sure. Look, you just heard Chuck Schumer. He does not want the Democratic Party to be the left-wing mirror image of the things they don't like about Donald Trump. They didn't like it when he said, I want to punch a protester in the face, or when he does all sorts of other things they think are uncivil. And that's the challenge. First of all, it's wrong because they didn't like it when Donald Trump did it. Second of all, it's tactically stupid because it's going to backfire. And you already saw the president using it, to say that his supporters are the victims of the left-wing mob. So it's not going to lead to anything good for Democrats. And, that's why you saw her called out. And hopefully they'll be able to restrain that because they have to make an argument on the merits.
Steve.
Well, it's been encouraging that some people have challenged what she said, even as many people have defended it or joined along with her. David Axelrod tweeted that he's kind of amazed and appalled by the number of folks on the left who applaud the expulsion of Sarah Huckabee Sanders from this restaurant, and then went on to say exactly what Mara said. He doesn't want to see the left mimic what they criticize in Donald Trump. But look, there's no long-term upside in this kind of incivility. Politics is the art of persuasion, and the people who make long-term gains in politics are the people who do a better job of persuading others that their views are right. Those are the kind of people who take political moments and make them political movements. These are not about arguments. You're not persuading anybody. If Democrats follow Maxine Waters' advice and get in the face of Republicans or harass them at a restaurant, is any Republican going to think, oh yeah, that's the right way to do this? I mean, and the same goes the other way too. I mean, if Donald Trump makes one of those comments, does he actually think he might convert a Democrat who could be interested in or persuaded by an argument on behalf of his policies? It's just not a long-term winner, good as it might feel in the short term.
Right, and on substance is where the battle lies. I said I was going to as of last week. Play as many sound bites as I could of our late friend Charles Krauthammer here talking about the Democratic resistance and what that means politically.
They don't have a message. This is the same reason that Hillary lost. So having nothing to say, they have now fixated on Trump. It's all on the resistance, all about Trump. But think of the big picture. Why do they want to win the House? For one reason. Not tax reform, not jobs. They want to win it so they can start impeaching the president, undoing the election of 2016. That is the biggest mistake, political mistake in political strategy I have ever seen. And I think people understand that's not a worthy cause.
1 year ago this week. All right, so on the immigration issue, the president saying hiring many thousands of judges, going through long and complicated legal process is not the way to go. We'll always be dysfunctional. People must simply be stopped at the border and told they cannot come into the U.S. illegally. Children brought back to their country. If this is done, illegal immigration will be stopped in its tracks at a very little by comparison cost. This is the only real answer, and we must continue to build the wall.
So last week, Donald Trump had everything thrown at him by everybody based on these images down on the border, some of which turned out to be from the previous administration. And the most spectacular, of course, being the photoshopped cover of Time magazine, where it has Donald Trump looking at this girl who's crying. Turns out that child was never separated from her parents. And in fact, further reporting shows that the mother had left her other children back home, which suggests that maybe she's not going to succeed at getting asylum, doesn't deserve asylum based on the criteria. But now, after a week of the hysteria has sort of passed, and we're still down to a really complicated situation on the border, and I think that move by Donald Trump to talk about keeping people from getting into the country so that we don't have to give them due process. It's an argument for building a wall or anything or something that prevents them from getting across the border.
Look, I agree last week was a bad week, but I think the message from the White House is still pretty muddled, and as soon as they clean it up and he gets back to the big, broad issue, we're strong on borders, the Democrats are weak on borders, that's safer ground for him. But when he's talking about due process, the reason why people have an asylum process is to see if they deserve to be let into this country or not. To just decide by fiat that every one of them should be sent back, that's what due process is. Or pick up someone who's an American citizen, just doesn't have their passport on him, send them over the border to Mexico. I mean, that's why we have a constitution.
This is what this story was undercovered. Fox News Sunday, the former Homeland Security chief, Jay Johnson, talking about not only child separation, but stopping people at the border. Take a listen.
Without a doubt, the images and the reality from 2014, just like 2018, are not pretty. And so we expanded family detention. We had then 34,000 beds for family detention, only 95 of 34,000 equipped to deal with families. So we expanded it. I freely admit it was controversial. We believed it was necessary at the time. I still believe it is necessary to maintain a certain capability for families. We can't have catch and release.
And he defended it, Steve. And I mean, there weren't Obama people being kicked out of restaurants.
No, right. I mean, the thing that was missing from last week's debate, well, there were lots of things missing from last week's debate, but one of the things that was missing was context. I mean, what we were seeing wasn't unprecedented. Now, the reason that it was happening, and the reason it was happening in increasing numbers, was unprecedented. It was a result of a deliberate policy decision that the Trump administration had made because they wanted to serve as a deterrent. The Obama administration had a different approach to it. I think they would argue that what they did, they had to do, and it was regrettable. But it happened. We didn't hear that it happened until several days into the debate. It was a failure on the part of the mainstream media, and I think Charlie's exactly right. I mean, there's all of this navel-gazing among journalists these days about what they can do to restore credibility. Well, the first thing you can do is get the story right. The second thing you can do is when you get it wrong, you don't stand by a misleading image. It's sort of incredible that picture that Time magazine used tells a story that isn't true in the most fundamental sense, and yet they're standing by the story.